All right, this is chapter 2 of Bradley Booth's book. They call him the Miracle Man, Sabbath. Malachi paused at the imposing courtyard gate and shook the dust from the folds of his robe. Beads of perspiration dotted his forehead as he glanced about, searching for some telltale sign that he had arrived at the residence he was looking for. A sparrow flitted to the twisted tendrils of a grapevine winding its way up the courtyard wall. The bird whistled a simple tune and then cocked its head to one side as though it were on some type of an inspection tour. "Hello, little one," Malachi said gently, his voice suddenly awed at the delicate features of the tiny bird. "You certainly don't appear as if you have a care in the world." Amazing, Malachi thought, that a creature so small could survive long enough to be carefree and sing its little songs. He smiled at the little fellow and then turned his mind to the business at hand. In a rich baritone cadence, he began to chant a Hebrew Sabbath day's blessing for those inside the gate. His voice rose and fell on the warm afternoon air like a drifting butterfly until a servant girl appeared. She opened a little sliding door in the gate. "Shalom, friend. The master of the house wishes to know who is calling." "Tell him I wish to speak to him of Jesus," Malachi replied. The girl's eyebrows raised in question until he added, "Jesus of Nazareth." After all, Jesus was a common name these days. She disappeared, only to return a few minutes later. "The rabbi will see you now." Malachi entered a courtyard of flowering vines and shrubbery. Exotic birds twittered in cages hung from the ceiling of a balcony overlooking the courtyard. The rabbi arrived moments later. His expensive robes revealed his position, and a silver-streaked beard gave him the dignity of a patriarch. He was short and still in middle age, but like many of the more affluent in Jerusalem, he ate well. Malachi came straight to the point. "Blessings to you, Rabbi. My name is Malachi, son of Obed. I'm a merchant from Caesarea, a retailer of carpets and tapestries, but it is Jesus of Nazareth that I have come to speak to you about." The religious leaders studied him. "Do you know Jesus of Nazareth?" "Only what I've heard of him. I've never met him personally. I was hoping you could tell me more about him." Malachi thought the rabbi looked a bit indignant. Was he wasting the man's time? It was obvious that one had to be important to even get into the rabbi's home. The older man studied Malachi carefully as though scrutinizing his intentions. He paused to take in the clothes Malachi was wearing, the cut of his hair, the money pouch tucked in his belt. Finally, he decided that his visitor appeared sincere enough. "I know the man." The rabbi's reply surprised Malachi. "Actually, he is scheduled to be here shortly. At the moment, I couldn't tell you where he is exactly, somewhere between here and Jerusalem. I imagine, probably on one of his Sabbath tours to teach and heal." The rabbi smiled at Malachi and settled himself heavily on a bench under the shade of a mulberry tree. "Please make yourself comfortable," he added, gesturing to a spot on the bench beside him. "You didn't journey far, I trust. Such a thing is not customary in Israel on the Sabbath, as I'm sure you know." "No, of course not." Malachi sensed a note of displeasure in the rabbi's voice when he spoke of Sabbath observance and Jesus. "But the rabbi is right," Malachi mused. "The Torah forbade long journeys on the Sabbath, but according to contemporary Jewish law, it was more than just banned. It was criminal." Somehow the rabbi disapproved of Jesus' behavior, Malachi realized, and he could understand that. But the religious leader's reaction also puzzled him. The merchant had asked an innkeeper whom he should see in order to learn more about this Jesus. Although Malachi had hoped that the rabbi would be a positive lead, now he wondered if contacting him hadn't been such a good idea after all. He would try one more time. Malachi cleared his throat. "So, if this Jesus of Nazareth, if he leaves his home on Sabbath, and his journeys take him far and wide, Then, ah, yes, Jesus and the Sabbath, the rabbi interrupted with a frown. Jesus is out somewhere on more than what one might call a Sabbath day's journey. But then again, Jesus of Nazareth seems to do as he pleases on the Sabbath. If there's any one thing that distinguishes him from others, it's his own personal sense of what is appropriate on the Sabbath day. The rabbi shook his head incredulously. If you haven't discovered that by now, you probably soon will. He took a seed from a basket beside him and offered it to a rose-ringed parakeet in a nearby cage of iron. The beautiful green bird with its narrow pink collar eagerly snatched the food. What do you want with Jesus? Is there someone sick in your family? No. Actually, I've just been hoping to find out a little more about him. I've heard about that his popularity has taken a turn for the worse as of late, at least with the leaders of the Sanhedrin. That's why I came to you. I thought that since you are a close friend of his, you might be able to help me out. Close friends? The rabbi raised his eyebrows. I wouldn't exactly say that we're close, but that's beside the point. You're right about his popularity with the priest. With the common people, it's a different story. But the priests and Pharisees? With a sigh, the rabbi paused to watch the shifting patterns the leaves of an almond tree made on the ground. Jesus of Nazareth delights in the good he can do on the Sabbath, the rabbi continued. That's what gets him into so much trouble. Our opinion, well, at least that of most of the Pharisees, is that he is far from orthodox in theory or practice. He is unpredictable, non-traditional, and most certainly irregular in his methods. The rabbi frowned again. And he is not satisfied with confining his healing ministry to a mere 6 days of the week. He insists on healing during the Sabbath hours too, and that often involves a lot of travel time as well as a lot of unnecessary healing. Unnecessary healing? Malachi knew he sounded surprised. The rabbi avoided his visitor's searching gaze by turning to the parakeet to give him another seed. Yes, healing that could wait until another day of the week. The rabbi appeared a bit impatient at Malachi's apparent ignorance of such matters, but mostly at his incessant questioning. Ritual cleansing for the body because of illness takes place day in and day out at the temple, the religious official added, but we do not offer those services on the Sabbath day. God did not intend the Sabbath for such things. We should not clutter it with the busy work of sinners and their maladies, when they could just as well seek healing on another day. The Sabbath was made for temple officials too, you know. We need our rest as well. Although the rabbi spoke authoritatively, he still appeared troubled. Malachi stared intently at him. You've a point, but healing people? I mean, if his miracles are from heaven, can one really tell God when to perform them and when not to? Doesn't God pretty much do as he pleases? The rabbi shifted uncomfortably. That would be a good rule to live by, he countered, if Jesus would leave it up to God. The rabbi sounded irritated. Not angry, just irritated. He squinted at Malachi as though he were attempting to explain the obvious to a simple child. What I'm referring to is Jesus' obsession with forgiveness, his habit of handing out forgiveness as though it were free. Why, he has made forgiveness in these parts as commonplace as the air we breathe. Hands it out as though he were God himself, and what's worse, he offers it to people who don't deserve it. The terminally ill, for example. I mean, some of the most wretched souls that come to us deserve to be ill because of the lives they've led. It's obvious that God has put his curse upon them as punishment for their lives of wickedness. Malachi had heard such sentiments before, but he had never been comfortable with them. Of course, he didn't have to deal with the issues on a daily basis as the rabbi did. The rabbi hurried on. It's like this. When someone comes to the temple to receive a clean bill of health from an illness, we wait until we see the obvious signs of healing before we declare them completely forgiven by God. To do otherwise is simply presumptuous. But, you see, he continued, Jesus offers the forgiveness to them first. I mean, it's as if he already knows that God is going to heal them before the fact, or something. Jesus does all this? He does. The rabbi frowned again and then added hastily, "It's all a bit confusing, I guess. On the one hand, as religious leaders, we try to offer our worshipers a healthy blend of sacred scripture and holy traditions sent down to us from our ancestors. And then Jesus comes along and offers a more radical view of God. His Father, that's the term he uses most often, I believe, and he makes their relationship look so simple, so unassuming." The rabbi shook his head slowly. Then, fidgeting with the basket of seeds in his lap, he hurriedly added, "But forgiveness, and the right to offer it freely to everyone, is available only from God. No man has the right to assume that role. Such a pretense on anyone's part is blasphemy. You must know that, I'm sure." He hesitated a moment at the sound of his own words before continuing. "That's what we've always believed and professed." The rabbi said it as if he was trying to convince himself, yet sensing that something was not quite right. Malachi ignored the rabbi's confusion. "But now," the rabbi looked down at his feet self-consciously, "but now Jesus has threatened all of that, or so it seems. The common people no longer look to us as the authority on such things. The fact is, at the moment, Jesus has more influence with them than we do. He eats and drinks with them, associates with them, consorts with them. I can assure you that it's done nothing for his image with the Sanhedrin." Malachi thought the rabbi looked sad, almost wistful, as he leaned forward and set the basket of seeds down on the rough paving stones of the courtyard. "I think things would be a lot better for Jesus if he were a little more conventional. If he would just stop being so contrary. He could have anything he wanted, anything at all. Fame, fortune, position, power." The religious leader lapsed into silence. The late afternoon had grown warmer, but Malachi remained oblivious to everything else. All he cared about at the moment was to find out more about Jesus. The parakeet on its perch cocked his head to one side as though he, too, was waiting to hear about this miracle worker. "And what do you think of Jesus, personally?" Malachi probed. The rabbi brushed a few seed fragments off his lap and stood. He leaned his shoulder against the trunk of a gnarled old olive tree and sighed as he gazed out over the courtyard wall at the Mount of Olives rising from the Kidron Valley below. "What do I think of him personally?" He stroked his beard pensively, and his eyes had a faraway look as if he were peering through a window into another time and place. "I guess, if I'm to be honest, He paused, then began again. "If you had asked me that 2 years ago, I would have been direct in my reply. Quite direct. Back then I hardly knew him, not the way the ordinary people did, but the heritage of his Galilean hill country stamped on his sun-bronzed features. He seemed ordinary enough, hardly one to be reckoned with, but of course that was then. And something has happened to change all of that now?" Malachi ventured. "It has," the rabbi replied meekly. "I guess you could say that he's given me a new lease on life." "A new lease?" "Yes, but it's more than that." The rabbi appeared a bit embarrassed at his own explanation. It's the effect Jesus continues to have on me whenever I'm around him." Malachi leaned toward him. The rabbi searched his visitor's face for any trace of insincerity, but he saw only genuine interest and an honest searching for the truth. "It's the way he looks at me," the rabbi continued, "the way I feel when his gaze fastens upon me. It's as though his thoughts were piercing through my very soul, as if he knows the deepest secrets of my life." The merchant sensed an undercurrent in the rabbi, as though some sort of transformation had suddenly come over him. Before he had sounded cynical, even bitter, but now he was almost submissive. With a shrug, the rabbi sighed. "In spite of my disapproval of some of the things Jesus does, I guess I find myself irresistibly drawn to him." His voice was unapologetic. "You would know what I'm talking about, Malachi, if you could meet him. If you met him, even once, you would understand completely what I'm trying to tell you." Again, he sighed heavily, as though he was trying to roll a great burden off of his chest. "You know, it's funny," he added with a look of chagrin. "Men of my profession never lack for words. It's in our blood to dispute and debate, to argue, to persuade. All my life I've been trained to find discrepancies in the claims of revolutionaries such as Jesus. I should have lots more to say in defense of my position and for all that is at stake here, but I don't." The rabbi just shook his head in disbelief. "Just look at me. In many ways I still hardly know the man, yet I find myself more and more expecting him to be the one all Israel has been waiting for. It's incredible." Malachi stared disbelievingly at him. "Are you saying that you think this Jesus is the Messiah?" The rabbi's reply came slowly, as though he had spent many hours in this very garden struggling to find words to express the conclusion that he had come to. "Many are saying he has to be, and I say that if he is, then that fact will no doubt soon reveal itself. It's inevitable, to my way of thinking." Several minutes of silence passed as the two men basked in the waning hours of the day. A butterfly flitted from one large blossom to another. "And what will you do about this Jesus?" Malachi finally asked, sensing the rabbi's seriousness. "I mean, a person of your position and influence can't afford just to abandon everything to follow him. Can you?" The rabbi smiled instinctively. "Probably not. However, maybe he will come to me. After all, he did accept my invitation readily enough. Perhaps he has finally realized that the backing of a man of my influence can place real power at his fingertips. Perhaps—" The rabbi had that faraway look in his eyes again. "It's possible that tonight may be the beginning of something great. That would be ideal, wouldn't it?" "Tonight? Why not? I have invited him to my house for a feast and a celebration. It's in his honor, of course. I must show Jesus how much his gift of life has meant to me." A sense of contentment relaxed the religious leader's face. "What is this gift of life you speak of?" Malachi asked. The rabbi hung his head and then straightened his shoulders to look Malachi full in the face. He answered slowly, searching for words. "It's hard for a man of my profession to reveal the secrets in his life. But I guess I owe you a complete explanation. I've come this far. I might as well let you know the rest." He shuddered. "I still lay awake nights thinking what I am now, what I almost was. I contracted leprosy." "Malachi, can you believe it? Me, a Pharisee, Simon of the Sanhedrin, a leper? And Jesus healed me." Slowly he shook his head. "What can I say? Leprosy?" Malachi repeated the word as though it were a deadly poison on his lips. "That's right," the rabbi admitted. "I was face to face with living death. But Jesus, in his compassion, healed me of the dreaded disease. Come to think of it, that business about forgiveness must certainly apply to me, too. I can't say that I deserve it, but Jesus gave it to me anyway." Simon nodded his head gently. "So I guess this feast is my way of thanking him. For now, at least." The older man took another deep breath, then stood. He rubbed his hands together briskly. "And we will do it right. We will spare no pains to make Jesus feel he is among friends. The guest roster was full long ago with every person of prominence in the area, and then some." Slowly he smiled. "Yes, indeed. This celebration will be the talk of the town, I'm certain. A celebration to end all celebrations. He paused. Can you join us? I'm sure we could make room for just one more. Malachi wasn't sure whether the invitation was genuine or simply an afterthought. Oh, thank you, but no. That would be an honor indeed, but I have an invitation elsewhere. I am to dine with an important merchant in Jerusalem this evening. In fact, I had better be going. My contact with the man this evening promises to be a lucrative one financially, so I dare not miss it. He rose to his feet. But please accept my grateful appreciation for your kind offer. Very well. The rabbi clapped his hands together, and within moments several servants appeared. I'd better be going too, he announced. The family will be gathering shortly. There is much to do. Evening prayers must be said, and then lamps must be lit, and food is to be prepared. You understand, of course. Smiling once again, he bowed slightly and extended an open hand. I'm sorry you can't join us, Malachi, but thank you for this pleasant visit. It has been good for me. Simon showed his visitor to the gate. If you have any more questions, please feel free to drop by again. He put his hand on Malachi's shoulder. Perhaps we can visit a little later in the week, sometime. The three of us, perhaps. We'll share a meal, you and I and Jesus. Or better yet, we could get together after the Passover. With all that's required of me in Jerusalem, I'll be lucky if I even get a chance to see my own shadow this week. And that's the end of chapter 2.